Hello, everyone. Welcome into today's webinar. My name is Nick Child. I'm the Director of Client Experience here at Harris Federal Employee Law Firm. We're excited to have you today. I'm here with Bo Harris. He is the President of Harris Federal Employee Law Firm. Bo is one of the foremost experts on this topic in the entire country, and so I'm excited to have him sit down and teach us and impart some of that knowledge on us today. A little bit more about us. We are a law firm based out of Lexington, Kentucky, and over the past 15 years, we've gotten over 3,500 approvals for federal disability retirement benefits, and we've done that at a 99% success rate. So we're really proud of that fact of how many people we've been able to help and how we have spent that time becoming experts in this field. So we're here to help you. We're here to help you understand this topic, to answer questions. In fact, we have a couple team members here to chat with you if you have questions during the webinar. If you have very specific questions on a case or your specific situation, I suggest that you call into our office and set up a consultation. The consultations are totally free. I know that sounds like a sales pitch, but it is really, really informative because so much of this information is based on specific situations and where people are in their employment with the federal government. So with that, excited to answer your questions, and here is Bo Harris to talk to you. Thanks.
So for today's presentation and webinar, we're going to be talking about the subject of OWCP, Federal Workers' Compensation, versus OPM disability retirement. This is a loaded topic. We're going to try to be as efficient and timely as possible, but there's a lot of information to get through. But before we get started, I wanted to run through a quick disclaimer that this presentation is for informational purposes only. We hope that you get a lot of value out of it, but please understand that it does not constitute legal advice, and this is not intended to serve that purpose. Simply intended to share information regarding these two benefits and the differences between them. So getting started, one thing that I want you to know is that our team is here for you during this presentation. We have a team of people on the back end of this webinar to answer questions that you might have during the presentation today. So feel free, to type some questions to them through the Q&A section of the window of the webinar. Again, our goal is to keep this as short as possible and as efficient as possible. So if you do have questions that do not get answered, feel free to call our office anytime to schedule an appointment with us, a free consultation. Of course, we're always more than happy to discuss your situation one-on-one through a free consultation and try to give you the best advice possible and point you in the right direction. So let's get started today. Again, the topic is federal workers' compensation versus federal disability retirement. So to begin, the first thing that I want to do is talk about OWCP, federal workers' compensation. And we want to kind of get a good baseline understanding about what that benefit is, so then we can kind of describe the differences of this benefit versus the other benefit, federal disability retirement. So let's look at what some of these acronyms mean, because people refer to this benefit in multiple different ways. So I think it's always wise to just try to understand what these acronyms are and kind of put that together with what they might be trying to say. DOL is Department of Labor. Now, that's the overarching federal agency that technically oversees all federal workers' compensation. A small part of Department of Labor consists of the Office of Workers' Compensation Programs. So that's the OWCP. A lot of people generically refer to federal workers' compensation as OWCP. So you'll probably most often hear that acronym when we're referring to FedComp. Also, the actual law that exists to govern the federal employees' workers' compensation is referred to as FECA, which is the Federal Employee Compensation Act. When you refer to OWCP, there are multiple different district offices all across the country. So depending upon where you live and work, you're going to be assigned to a specific district office within the Office of Workers' Compensation Programs. There's multiple district offices, and the one that you're going to be communicating with, or somebody's going to be communicating on your behalf for, is going to be with that specific district office. So jumping into what is federal workers' compensation, I always like to try to break it down to the three major benefits. There's multiple benefits that come with the workers' compensation claim, but really, if you kind of categorize the major ones, there's three of them. The first one is wage loss benefits. The second one is medical benefits, which is your doctor's bills being paid for, your prescriptions being paid for that pertain to the accepted condition. And the third one is a schedule award. Now, again, to be entitled to any benefits, you have to first establish that your claim is accepted. So you have to make an application for acceptance, and then your claim has to be accepted by the Office of Workers' Compensation Programs to even be eligible for these benefits that I'm going to discuss today. But they also only pertain to the accepted diagnosed medical conditions. So these benefits also only pertain to what is accepted as a diagnosed medical condition for your claim. So if your OWCP claim is accepted, then you may be entitled to these OWCP benefits. Again, I emphasize the word accepted because there is a process to go through to just try to get your claim accepted and approved. Okay? So these benefits I'm going to talk about only pertain to people, claimants that actually have an accepted claim. Okay? These benefits only pertain to the accepted diagnosed conditions. So when we discuss what is included with your federal workers' compensation claim, remember that that they only pertain to the accepted diagnosed conditions. They also, in order to have an accepted claim, you have to have a work-related injury. So once your claim is accepted, the three major benefits are wage loss benefits, medical benefits, and a schedule award. And I'm going to dive into each of those things to give you a comprehensive understanding of what those benefits are. But really what we're talking about is wage loss, medical benefits, and schedule award. So what are wage loss benefits? Some people refer to these as total temporary disability benefits as well. But essentially they are payments made to you by the Office of Workers' Compensation Programs for time that you miss at work due to an accepted work-related injury or illness. Remember, the illness or injury could be traumatic or it could be occupational. So there may be some time in between when you actually file your claim for workers' compensation and before they actually accept it as an accepted claim or approve it. That time is actually covered with wage loss payments to you through a benefit called continuation of pay, or COP. So that's an interim payments to you while they're deciding if you do or do not have an approved, accepted work-related claim. How much is the wage loss? Well, the wage loss is actually 75% of your pay when you have dependents, and it's 66 2/3% when you do not have dependents. Now, this is payments made to you that are tax-free, but please remember that it is not intended to be a long-term benefit. This is not the solution to the fact that you can no longer work at your job. This is a temporary total disability payment to you. And I want to emphasize the word temporary because it's just not something that you should depend on long-term. To get a better understanding of what this benefit is, here's an illustration. And if you imagine that you have your current earnings over here at 100%, whenever you go on to wage loss, once you get a claim accepted and you start missing time at work, it's converted into wage loss. So you're going to receive a percentage of your salary while you're not working. We oftentimes call this the temporary train. This is something that will stop eventually, but it is a temporary benefit that you're entitled to. The second major benefit is your medical expenses being paid for. Who pays the doctor? So once you have an accepted claim, you actually have an open OWCP claim number, and you can actually seek medical treatment for your accepted work-related injuries or illnesses, and they should be all covered and paid for by your workers' compensation claim. Now, this benefit should last for the lifetime of the injury or illness. It should not be taken away from you so long as you still have the need for medical treatment for the accepted diagnosed conditions. Now, I will say that finding a doctor who is competent in the OWCP realm and experienced with their procedures, that can be very difficult. So I just want to warn you that it's not necessarily as easy as it should be for a federal employee to find a doctor who's willing to treat them with an accepted federal workers' compensation claim as their form of payment. Okay, so moving on to the third major benefit is a schedule award. What is a schedule award? A schedule award is a payment to you, the claimant, for a loss of use to a body part that has been caused by your accepted work-related injury. So this is a benefit. For lack of a better word, I don't like using this word, but it's hard to get a grasp on what this means without using this word. But the word settlement, okay? It's not truly a settlement, but it's kind of like a settlement. They are paying you, they're providing you compensation because you're proving that you have a loss of use to a part of your body that is permanent due to an accepted workers' compensation claim. Now, this benefit does have some restrictions, and some of those are that it can only be paid after wage loss payments have ended. So you can't double dip with the wage loss and the schedule award at the same time, and we'll get into more of that here in a few minutes. But you can't get both at the same time. You also have to be at maximum medical improvement. And that means that you are at a place in treatment that it is unlikely, with or without continued medical treatment, that that your condition is going to improve significantly in the next 12 months or so. We have to use an impairment rating, and that impairment rating must be in accordance with the AMA Guides 6th edition. That's a requirement. We have to prove the fact that you have this percentage of loss of use, and that rating has to be in accordance with the 6th edition guides of the AMA. Again, finding a doctor who is familiar with those procedures and understands the 6th edition of the AMA guides can be very difficult. The schedule part of the word schedule award comes because they actually have a schedule list of members, parts of your body, and actually they attribute weeks of compensation that are their form of allowances towards that particular body part. You can see here in this illustration, this is actually the schedule that they've published. An arm, if it was in total like impaired, it would be worth 312 weeks of compensation, and so on and so on. So they've actually come up with this schedule, and they've identified the body parts, and they've assigned a value in terms of weeks of compensation that those particular parts of your body would be worth in regards to a schedule award. So let me talk about how a schedule award is calculated, because a lot of people are interested in this, and it's a very commonly asked question to our law firm. So a schedule award, again, is really based upon three things: the part of the body that's impaired, the percentage of impairment that is assessed to that part of the body, and then the actual money that that claimant earns. So it's all based upon what the weekly compensation wage rate is for that particular employee. And those are the three components that go into the calculation of a schedule award. So as an example, let's look at this calculation here and assume that this person has a 50% impairment rating to his or her leg, okay? So the leg in total, back referring to the schedule, is worth 288 weeks of compensation pay. Now, we've had a doctor look at this. They have done an assessment. This person's reached maximal medical improvement. The doctor has given us a report in accordance with the AMA Guide 6th edition, and the findings are conclusive that this person has a 50% impairment rating to that leg. Now, what that means is that the schedule award in this particular case will be worth 144 weeks of compensation pay. So then the next part is we move down to, well, what is the average weekly comp rate for this particular employee? Now, a weekly comp rate is different than your weekly salary. Remember, the compensation rate is either based upon 75% if you have dependents or 66 2/3% if you do not have dependents. Okay, so it's your comp rate, not necessarily your salary divided by 52. Okay, but in this situation, this particular person's compensation rate is $732.61, and if we multiply that by the 144 weeks, we arrive with a total schedule award value of $105,495.84. So that's a quick example of how a schedule award is calculated. There are a couple nuances that could be thrown in there, but essentially that's a very simple calculation and display of how a schedule award would be calculated. So now I want to focus on what are the differences between a schedule award and wage loss. Now, we're still within the world of federal workers' compensation, and we're still within those three major benefits here. But I told you earlier that you can't receive both of these at the same time. And the reason why is because they're both considered forms of compensation, and simply you just cannot receive them concurrently. So a lot of times people ask, well, which one do I need? Which one do I want? And what's the best advice there? Well, really, it pertains to your particular situation, and timing is crucial. Because in theory, a person could be on a wage loss benefit, and then stop the wage loss benefit to receive a schedule award. And then after the schedule award was up, because it's based upon a number of weeks, right, then the workers' compensation wage loss could be turned back on. Now, that's a lot of hypothetical stuff there. But really, the way to think about it is that schedule award typically comes after wage loss has kind of run its course, and you're no longer going to receive wage loss. Or potentially you went back to work. Let's say that you actually went back to work and don't have any more wage loss, then that would be an opportunity to then look at a schedule award. Or potentially you went off and found a replacement benefit to supplement your income, so you don't need wage loss anymore. Okay, so there's multiple reasons why wage loss could stop or end, and then you could receive the schedule award. But really, we don't think it's great advice to kind of interrupt your wage loss period to pay the schedule award, because in our theory there, you're just kind of wasting wage loss in order to get a schedule award. You should really truly wait until you either get kicked off of wage loss or you find a replacement for wage loss to then pursue the schedule award. This is an illustration. I mean, this is just makes it more simple to see and visually understand what I'm talking about. You again have your earnings before you're injured. Then you have your earnings and what they might be after you have an accepted federal workers' comp claim, and it's paying you that percentage of your salary for a year or two or maybe many years. But then eventually that benefit will stop, because again, it's only a temporary benefit. It's either going to stop because you choose for it to stop, or it's going to stop because there's been evidence created against you that it should be stopped. But once it does stop, then that would be the time to pursue the schedule award. Okay, so now that we have a pretty good understanding of what are the three major components of a federal workers' compensation claim, I'm going to completely switch gears and talk about the different benefit and how it's different than federal workers' compensation. And what I'm referring to now is federal disability retirement. This is the benefit that is truly intended to be the solution for the fact that you permanently cannot return back to your job, and your agency is unable to accommodate your medical restrictions. Okay. So a baseline for federal disability retirement, I think it's good to start there so everybody knows what we're talking about. This is a benefit that is already built into your existing retirement system, whether you're a FERS employee, Federal Employee Retirement System, or a Civil Service Retirement System, CSRS employee. This is a benefit that's available to you and it's already built into your retirement system. It is something that must be proven by way of an adjudication process at the Office of Personnel Management, OPM, in Washington, D.C. So now knowing where the benefit comes from, let's talk about how much federal disability retirement actually pays you, okay? A couple good ways to think about this is an early medical separation to get you to the age of 62 or retirement. So you have your career, you're ongoing, then all of a sudden something happens to you medically, whether it's an illness or an injury, and it creates a situation where you cannot continue to perform the essential functions of your job, and you need an alternative route. Okay, this is why we call it early medical separation, and it's essentially a benefit that's designed to get you from where you're at now to the age of 62. For the first year after someone's been approved for federal disability retirement and they're on the benefit, it's going to pay 60% of the high 3 average. That's for the first year. So the entire time that somebody's on that benefit for the first year, it's 60% of their high 3 average. For every other additional year that you remain on the benefit, all the way up into the age of 62, it's going to pay you 40% of your high 3 average. Now, the high 3 average, in case you don't know, is essentially they look at your career earnings and they pick the 3 consecutive years where you've earned the most income gross. And they combine that and average that, and that's how they come up with your high 3 average. So again, for the first year on disability retirement, it's 60% of your high 3 paid in monthly installments. And for every other year, it's 40% of the high 3 paid again in monthly installments. The income that you do receive from federal disability retirement is taxable income. So you need to know that that's a distinct difference between federal workers' compensation and federal disability retirement. Federal workers' comp wage loss, which is what we were just previously talking about, is tax-free income versus federal disability retirement is actually taxable income. And you also have choices to keep your life and health insurance if you want to, which are group policies. You also have options for a reduction in your annuity for a surviving spouse benefit. And we can get into those details at a later time. So this is an illustration to just help you visualize how the payments look in disability retirement. You have your high 3 average, and we're calling that 100% because that's the high 3 average. The first year, again, is 60% of your high 3 average, and then every other year that you remain on the benefit until the age of 62, it's going to be 40% of that high 3 average. And that's going to provide what we call a bridge to 62. That's kind of an internal thing, but we tell people that this is a way for you to get where you're at now into the age of 62. And there's a lot of benefits that come along with that too. One of the very important things I want to point out to you that is a part of this benefit that is extremely critical to your long-term planning is that each year that you're on disability retirement will count as another earned credible year of federal service. So for someone who arrives at the place where they need a disability retirement, they obviously have credible years of service that they've already earned. But for the time period that they're going to be on this benefit all the way through the age of 62, each year that they're on federal disability retirement, they're going to earn an additional year of credible service towards their full retirement credible service years. These years are accumulated and they're added to the pre-existing credible years of service. This is extremely important because it will drastically change what your annual annuity value is at the time that you get disability retirement versus the time that you get to age 62. Another part of disability retirement that can be really helpful to people is the fact that they can also work in the private sector and earn an income on top of receiving your disability retirement payments. This is a really, really cool part of this benefit, and that's very unique to this benefit. You can actually go out in the private sector and you can start a new career, and you can earn an income of up to 80% of earned income on top of your disability retirement. Now, that's 80% of your old position's current salary. So essentially, you're going to have your baseline disability retirement payments, but on top of that, you can earn up to 80% of your old position's current salary. And that can be huge for somebody who is not totally disabled. You know, we're only talking about occupational disability when we talk about a disability retirement. So we're proving that you can't do your job, not that you can't do any job. Okay, many of our clients that we've assisted, they go off and they pursue another type of employment. Some people have gone off and pursued careers in real estate. They're a realtor, or some people go back and they become teachers, and so on and so on. So we have a lot of those stories that our clients share with us, and it's always so fun to hear them talk about their new career, right? So they had this stop in their federal career, and they have an annuity in place that gives them the baseline, which is the disability retirement payments. And then they can go off, they can start their own thing, they can pursue something else and earn an income on top of that. Here's an illustration to give you an idea what that looks like. On the first year, again, remember, you're getting 60% of that high 3 average, and on top of that, you can earn 80% of what your previous job's current salary is. So on for the years after that, too. In year 2 and 3 and 4 plus, you're going to receive the 40%. You can earn an income of up to 80% on top of that. I do want to point out here that this is vastly different than federal workers' compensation wage loss. So a lot of people who are dependent upon wage loss, they understand that they actually cannot earn additional income at the same time that they're being compensated by their federal workers' compensation wage loss benefit. That is a very important thing to remember. So disability retirement, you can earn an income on top of the payments. Federal workers' compensation, you cannot. In fact, they continuously ask you for an earnings report, and they will adjust, even retroactively, what they pay you while you're working. So you can't do this with federal workers' comp wage loss. You can do it with federal disability retirement. So some qualification standards that I want to just chat about for a few seconds regarding disability retirement is we're trying to prove that you're less than 100% successful in at least one area of your job that is due to a medical condition. And when I say one area, it regarding performance, attendance, or conduct. Okay, so we're not fully successful in one area pertaining to performance, attendance, or conduct. You also must have a doctor that you're seeing that will verify that your medical conditions, that you do have them and that they impact your work. Your medical conditions must be expected to last at least 12 months. But again, that does not have to be work-related. So the injury, the illness, how this problem that you have that's preventing you from working to your full capacity, again, does not have to be work-related. We have a lot of clients that develop diabetes, or they have an injury during a soccer game or whatever it might be, but now they have a condition that prevents them from doing their job, but it was not work-related. For FERS employees, you have to have at least 18 months of service, and also you cannot be eligible for immediate unreduced retirement. So we're speaking about people who are not already eligible for their immediate unreduced retirement. So one extremely important thing that I want to point out to you is that there is an actual deadline in which you have to apply for disability retirement, and that's pretty much irreversible. Once you miss that deadline, you lose your rights to apply for disability retirement. That deadline is 1 year from the date of your separation of service. So if you have already been separated from service, you have to apply for this benefit within a 1 year time frame of that date of separation. Again, if you go past that date, then it's very, very unlikely that you're going to be able to apply for disability retirement. There are a lot of ins and outs in regards to the process and the timeline and the application. There's also all sorts of appeal rights that you may have with this benefit, and we could spend an hour on just those things. So we have other resources available if you want to dive deep into some of those things, and you can find those on our website. You can also call us, and we could give you a deeper dive into what that means and give you some insight if we think that you would be eligible for a benefit like this. But now that you have a pretty good baseline for what is federal workers' compensation, those three major benefits, and then also what is disability retirement, I want to just spend a couple more minutes explaining kind of the key differences between those two benefits. Again, I hope that these illustrations in this webinar gives you enough of a difference in terms of how to keep them separate, like in your mind, because we hear a lot of people confusing these two benefits all the time, and a lot of time that we spend on the phone and a consultation is really just trying to help people understand that that they are different benefits and that they need to be treated differently, and that the timing of using both benefits is very, very crucial if you do actually have the ability to have both of these claims open at the same time. So let me discuss some offsets between disability retirement and federal workers' compensation. Here I've got up on the screen those three major benefits from federal workers' compensation again. And there are things that you can receive at the same time, and there's things that you cannot receive at the same time. So these are offsets. Rule of thumb is you can be approved for both OWCP and disability retirement at the same time. However, you cannot receive both the OWCP wage loss and disability retirement payments concurrently. So you kind of have to pick one or the other, okay? But it's really important to understand that our theory, our philosophy is if you do have an existing federal workers' compensation claim and you are on wage loss, that you can go ahead and get your application started and get your disability retirement claim approved, and you can actually choose to put it on hold while you're on workers' compensation wage loss, and then it can be there for the day that you get kicked off of wage loss, or you choose to not be on wage loss anymore because it's just too difficult to continue to prove your eligibility there. But regardless, the disability retirement is always going to be there because you've gotten it approved and you've put it on hold, and we see that as a very valuable strategy because there are a lot of people who are dependent upon OWCP wage loss to the extent that everything is dependent upon that benefit coming in every month. And I promise you, we have seen over and over and over again that benefit be taken away from people who have gotten dependent on that benefit. They've created enough evidence against you, and now they've taken the benefit away, and then or they've proven that you can work somewhere and earn an income, so therefore they're going to reduce the amount that they pay you, so they're going to reduce it. But the point is that benefit will end, and if you have already that disability retirement approved, that can start the very next day. We have had a lot of unfortunately sad phone calls where people haven't had that strategy in place, and they've been totally dependent upon their workers' compensation wage loss, and then when that day comes where where that benefit gets taken away, they don't have anything else to turn to. So they have no income at that point in time. So you can avoid that by, if you do qualify for both of these benefits and you're already on wage loss, go ahead and start that process to disability retirement so you can put it on hold once it gets approved. Another thing to remember, that you can't receive the schedule award from workers' compensation while you're on wage loss too. We talked about that earlier. You know, the schedule award, the payment for the permanent loss of use that you have, you can't receive that until you're off of wage loss from your same workers' compensation claim. So another good strategy is, if you were to transition off of wage loss and on to the already approved and on hold disability retirement, once that is done, you can then file for and receive a schedule award because you're no longer receiving your wage loss. So we have a lot of clients who can utilize this timing and this strategy to maximize these two benefits to work together versus work against each other. Here's a good illustration of somebody kind of going through this process where they've got their regular pay, which is represented here, then they go off on a workers' compensation claim, and they've got their percentage of their salary that they're drawing while they're not working, and then that stops, and they switch over to disability retirement. And again, right there, if you already have that approved, you can just switch over the next day. If you don't already have that approved, then you actually have to start the entire process right then and there, and that can take some time. I mean, that could take a long time to get that benefit approved. But once you're off of wage loss, then you can actually file for and receive that schedule award. And again, the disability retirement can be there and in place while you're doing that. And that disability retirement can serve as that bridge between whatever age you are then all the way to the age of 62, which would get you into a regular retirement situation. The reason why it's important for you to understand that this 1-year deadline is critically important, because we've seen it over the years where a person is not thinking ahead, and because of that, they really limit their possibilities for the future benefits. A good example is sometimes from time to time we get a call from somebody who is on federal workers' compensation wage loss, and they're dependent upon that benefit. And they call us and they're panicking because they've been on that benefit for 5, 10, sometimes 15 years. And then they're starting to see the signs that benefit is going to be taken away. They're going to be kicked off of their wage loss benefits. But the sad thing is, in those situations, if they were actually separated from service, you can still be on workers' compensation wage loss, but you could be separated as a federal employee years ago. If they've been separated for more than a year at that point in time, they've already lost their right to file for the federal disability retirement. Now that's extremely sad, because those conversations are hard to tell somebody. There's no other plan B now available, because you didn't think ahead about, well, what happens if this benefit ever gets turned off? And you might not be aware that while you're on that workers' compensation wage loss, your agency, they've terminated you. They've actually separated you from service. And if they ever do separate you from service, again, remember that there is a 1-year deadline to begin your application for disability retirement. And if you miss it, there's no going back. So if you get beyond that 1 year, and then further down the line, federal workers' compensation wage laws cut you off, there's no going back. And that's a situation that we want you as a listener to avoid, and then because that can really affect the maximization strategies towards these benefits and what your long-term future will look like. So that wraps up my presentation for today's webinar. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you got some good information from this. I'm going to pass this back over to Nick Child now, and he's got some closing remarks. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Bo. Hopefully you all learned a lot more about this topic, and I know you might still have some questions. We're going to leave the chat open here for about 15 minutes to answer any questions you might have. If it goes longer than that, feel free to call into our office and schedule a consultation. and get those questions answered. But we're very thankful to have you with us today, thankful to be able to teach you a little bit more about this topic, and we hope you have a good one. Thanks for coming.